Hey guys, I'm Annabelle. It's been a hot minute since I've uploaded anything, mostly because I've gone to a technical college called TAFE to learn some pattern making and dressmaking, and it's put my prior skills a bit to shame. But I have been working on a lot. Just have to actually get that edited and uploaded. Basically, I had a costume party. I needed to make 2 bags in a week, and then I had this invite, and I needed something ocean themed to do around all these other projects. And I thought, my girl Korra. It's pretty easy to do if you have a top, trackies, combat boots, if you're going for the book 4 look. Fits the short hair, I know it's blonde. All I had to do was the sleeves and the skirt. You're gonna need some blue stretch fabric, something like a lycra or even a t-shirt fabric works fine. And then something to mimic that fur leather skirt. So I went for some thick pleather that I've used for an old pirate costume. And then I needed some fur trim, which I couldn't find, so I went for polar fleece. Really cheap sort of stuff, and I just used it like a bias binding around the edge of the skirt. Surprisingly, that was the easiest part of this project. First, we need to pattern make. Basically, I took a whole bunch of measurements for the arm. The full length bicep to knuckle, bicep to elbow, elbow to wrist, wrist to knuckle, and then measuring the whole way around the bicep, elbow, mid forearm, wrist, and the knuckle and thumb together. Make sure to account for stretch, but you also have a seam allowance, so that might cancel out. Basically, I just put down the length, and then coming out from the center on each side, all of the width measurements. From there, just cut it out on the fabric, and then sew up the edges. I went for a twin needle. It's the best thing you can do if you have a regular machine. Just thread up the top twice. It also gives that real store-bought look of an overlocked edge, but you have to make sure that you do the hem on the right side for that to show up, since the underside is going to have a close zigzag stitch. As you can see, that is the top hem. I didn't add elastic here, mainly just because this kind of lycra material was stretchy enough on its own, but if you're using something looser, I would recommend that so you're not pulling sleeves up all night. When I measured out the pattern, I made sure that everything on the hand was quite loose and long because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it yet. But after I tried it on, I did a V from the forefinger to the thumb and then sewed through that, not through my hand, you get it. I did the same thing for the knuckle hem as I did for the top hem, but for the thumb, it's really thin. I couldn't get that under a machine. I just folded it under once since the stretch fabric isn't gonna fray anyway, and just did a hand stitched back stitch to secure that down. And there you go. This is definitely something you can use for a multitude of different costumes and cosplays, all sorts of superhero stuff. It's a really versatile thing to be able to make. While the twin needle was still in the machine, as well as the blue thread, I decided to make the underskirt. I don't know if you've noticed, but she actually has this sort of triangular thing coming down to cover the top of the trackies. I started off with the band that goes around her hips, just sewing up a tube. Then when I had the right sides out, I put that seam towards the back and then just folded in maybe a centimeter inwards for each of the raw ends and then stitch those down. Using the same sort of hip measurement that I used for the tube, I wanted to cut the pleather. I put it on the mannequin for ease. I basically measured out what I want and cut off the excess. And here's me putting it on the mannequin a second time just to touch up and add some darts. Her book 4 skirt is actually much shorter and more fitted, so I really wanted it to sit comfortably and not ride up to the waist while I was wearing it. So I added 2 in the back and 2 directly in the sides. I just kept pins in at crucial points and then came in with the tailor's chalk afterwards so I could properly put those lines in. You only really need to do adjustments on one side and then transfer all of that once it's off the mannequin, so it's all equal, all even. I also used a kind of thin pleather cord and a large button as the closure. Korra actually has this white gem in the middle to secure everything, and I've seen people do this out of polymer clay, but it was just too much effort for the time that I had, and I felt this fit the aesthetic anyway. I was going to be wearing a gym top, so accuracy wasn't the biggest thing here. Then the actual underskirt. I didn't want to waste too much fabric, so I literally just made the triangle with the length as half of that hip measurement and the length, hypotenuse, about 20 centimeters. Oh no. As you can see, it rippled a bit around the edges, which means I stretched it too much while it was going through the machine. Then I'm sewing down these darts back to my regular needle. I thought it would be much tougher to sew this fabric, and I really thought I f***ed it up. I thought I broke the needle. Turns out I just didn't secure the new needle into the machine properly. Thank goodness. It was pretty bulky, so I really needed to sew that bulk down. You really need to sew that bulk down. You always do it towards the back. It's just the standard, it just makes it look cleaner. I just decided to top stitch over that edge. It's really hard to film this while I'm sewing, but basically I was pulling either side of the pleather away from that dart seam just so there wasn't any bubbling or rippling happening on the right side of the fabric while I was sewing. Then I sewed down the loop, basically just the ends. I zigzagged over them. Basically I just stitched all over the damn thing so it wasn't going to come undone. And then I did the button on the opposite side, just hand stitched.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
So it's a bit weird how I made that front underskirt, I know, but I decided to attach it on either side with a quick hand stitch just before the dart. So the back of the skirt is pleather and the front is lycra, and then I have these two pleather edges that attach over, hence overskirt. It's really hard to show, but hopefully that makes sense.
I goes on, hopeful, yes I am.
Then I hand sewed the belt just at the front over the top of the loop and around the button. Maybe I should have done the button after this step, but then I would have been sewing through more layers. Worked out either way. Also just hand stitched at points on the sides and at the back just so it wouldn't come up and off the skirt. And then lastly, we're hot gluing the trim. I actually thought this would be really complicated, especially since I was just using fabric and not a ready-made trim, but it was one of the fastest pieces of the process. It's really the spark of the costume. That's what I think makes it most recognizable, since the front doesn't necessarily resemble it just from memory for people. Basically, I just cut a really long strip out from the selvage, and then I pulled it so its natural stretch would curl. That way, the fabric was going the way it wanted to go already. And then I attached it rather like bias binding. If you don't know what that is, I'm basically securing the raw edges onto the inside. So I'm hot gluing on the front and back and hiding all of that. It was surprisingly quick and easy. It only took about 10 minutes max just for that whole hot gluing process. Then the leftover edges, you can either hand sew in like we did for the belt or hot glue those down and you're really done. And there you go. It wasn't the most accurate, but it can be done in a day and on a budget. It's apparently recognizable enough to be Avatar related or whatever, so that's enough. Thanks for tuning in. I've got some new stuff coming up. Hopefully that'll be uploaded soon, and I'll see you next time.